The spear shaft snaps in Leonidas's hands, and he doesn't hesitate, just reverses grip and drives the jagged wood into a Persian's throat before the man can process that the Spartan king is now fighting with a broken weapon. Blood sprays across bronze that's already slick with it, and the body drops into a pile that's waist-high now, corpses stacked so thick they've become the terrain itself. This is dawn on the third day at Thermopylae, the hot gates, and the math that was always impossible has become cosmically absurd. 300 Spartans and 7,000 Greek allies holding a mountain pass against Xerxes' 200,000. Except the pass is so narrow that only 10 men can fight shoulder to shoulder, which means Persia's numbers are just bodies waiting their turn to die. And Spartans have been training to kill efficiently since they were 7 years old, beaten and starved and forged into weapons that look like men. The hot gates are earning their name today, not from the sulfur springs that steam nearby, but from the heat of massed bodies and spilled blood cooking under August sun. Leonidas is 60 years old, ancient for a warrior in an age when most men are crippled or dead by 40. Every joint screams. His shoulders are masses of scar tissue from decades of shield work. His knees grind bone on bone with each step. But he's fighting in the front rank because Spartan kings always fight in the front rank. Not symbolic leadership from the rear, but actual close quarters killing, leading by being the first to meet the enemy and the last to retreat. Except Spartans don't retreat. That's the fundamental equation of Spartan warfare. You win or you die on the ground where you stood. There's no third option, no honorable withdrawal, no live to fight another day calculation. The phalanx holds or the phalanx dies. And since the phalanx has never broken in living memory, death is theoretical until suddenly it isn't. The Persians come again. These ones are immortals, Xerxes' elite guard of 10,000 warriors so named because casualties are immediately replaced to keep the unit at exactly 10,000 forever. They're professionals, the best Persia has, wearing scale armor that gleams like fish skin, and wielding spears and composite bows that can punch through lesser armor at 100 yards. They advance with disciplined precision, shields interlocking, moving like a single organism. They look like they might actually break through. Leonidas lets them close to 30 feet, then gives the order every Spartan has drilled since childhood: withdraw. The phalanx breaks. 300 Spartans turn their backs and run in apparent panic, fleeing up the pass in what looks like complete collapse. The immortals see victory, surge forward in pursuit, abandoning formation because suddenly they're racing to be first to kill a fleeing Spartan, to claim that glory, to be the warrior who broke the unbreakable phalanx. They charge into the narrow section of the pass where Persian corpses from yesterday's fighting create obstacles, where the terrain funnels them into a space barely 20 feet wide, where they bunch together because there's nowhere else to go, and their own momentum drives them forward into the killing box. The Spartans turn, shields slam together with a sound like thunder, spears level, and the immortals realize too late, always too late, that Spartans don't break, that this was a trap, that they've just abandoned their disciplined formation and crammed themselves into a space where the Spartan phalanx can do what it does best: turn warfare into organized slaughter. The killing is methodical. 8-foot spears extending from the first 3 ranks create a wall of bronze-tipped death. The immortals can't retreat because their own reinforcements are still pushing forward from behind. They can't advance because advancing means impaling yourself on Spartan spears. So they die, professionally and efficiently, their elite status meaning nothing except they understand how badly they've been played in the seconds before Spartan bronze punches through their throats. 2,000 immortals die in that killing box. 2,000 casualties in a unit that's supposed to maintain 10,000 exactly. Xerxes watches from his golden throne, positioned on a hillside overlooking the pass, watches his finest troops break and flee back through the corpse-choked corridor, leaving bodies stacked like cordwood. He's starting to understand the strategic nightmare he's facing. He can't flank the Spartans, sea on one side, vertical cliff on the other. He can't starve them out. Greek supply ships reach them easily by sea. He can't overwhelm them with numbers because the pass won't allow it. And every day he sits here, his massive army consumes food and water in quantities that would feed Athens for months.
The King of Kings, ruler of an empire stretching from Libya to India, is being held hostage by 300 men in a pass so narrow a child could skip a stone across it. The first twist arrives that afternoon, when Persian deserters, Greeks from Ionia who were conscripted into Xerxes' army, sneak across to the Spartan lines with intelligence. The Persians are offering a fortune for information about a mountain path, any route that bypasses Thermopylae. The pass is militarily unbreakable, so Xerxes is looking for geography to solve what violence cannot. Leonidas nods slowly. He knows about the path, a goat trail over Mount Kallidromos that descends behind the Greek position. He stationed 1,000 Phocian hoplites up there specifically to guard against this exact scenario. But the Phocians aren't Spartans, and gold buys information even in wars fought over freedom. That night, a local Greek named Ephialtes, a shepherd who knows every trail in these mountains, arrives at Xerxes' tent and trades the location of the mountain path for more wealth than 10 generations of his family could earn. Persian sources later claim he was deformed, rejected for military service by the Greeks, motivated by revenge. Greek sources paint him as pure traitor, selling out his people for Persian gold. Probably both are partially true. Probably he was just a man who saw an opportunity to become rich and took it without thinking about the corpses his information would create. Xerxes sends the immortals, or what's left of them after today's slaughter, up the mountain path under cover of darkness. 10,000 men climbing single file through terrain so steep that losing your footing means falling to your death. They climb all night, guided by Ephialtes, moving through blackness broken only by starlight and the occasional torch that risks giving away their position. The Phocian guards hear them coming around dawn. 10,000 men can't move silently no matter how careful they are. But hearing them and stopping them are different calculations. The Phocians number 1,000, positioned to defend a trail they thought was too difficult for a major force to navigate. When the immortals appear out of the pre-dawn darkness, like demons materializing from nightmare, the Phocians panic. Some fight, most retreat to higher ground, to more defensible positions, to anywhere except the place they're supposed to be holding. They're not cowards, they're just not Spartans, haven't been raised from childhood to stand and die, haven't internalized the equation that retreat equals dishonor worse than death. The immortals pour through the mountain pass unopposed. By the time the sun rises on the third day, they're descending toward Thermopylae's rear, moving to attack the Greek position from behind, to turn the defensive bottleneck into a death trap where numerical superiority finally matters. A runner reaches Leonidas just after dawn with news that collapses the entire strategic situation. The Persians are coming from behind. The defensive position that made 300 Spartans equal to an army is about to become an encirclement where they'll be surrounded and annihilated. The allied Greek forces, Thespians, Thebans, Corinthians, soldiers from various city-states, immediately begin discussing withdrawal, fall back, preserve the army, fight another day from better positions. Leonidas stands silent for a long moment, doing the mathematics. The Allied forces need time to retreat down the coast road, to reach ships, to evacuate south before the Persians complete their encirclement. Someone has to hold Thermopylae for a few more hours, has to delay the Persians long enough for the withdrawal to succeed. Someone has to stay behind and die. The decision is already made because the oracle at Delphi made it months ago. Before the Spartans marched north, Leonidas consulted the oracle about the coming war. Her prophecy was unambiguous. Either Sparta falls or a Spartan king must die. When the Ephors, Sparta's ruling council, heard this, they chose Leonidas specifically because he was old, because he'd already produced heirs, because his death would fulfill the prophecy without wasting a young king with decades of rule ahead. Leonidas accepted the mission knowing it was one way. Every one of his 300 knew it too when they volunteered, chosen specifically because they all had living sons to continue their bloodlines, because Sparta could afford to lose them without losing the next generation. They're not here by accident or bad luck. They're here because someone has to die to save Greece, and Spartans have spent 3 centuries building a society designed to produce men willing to die on command. Leonidas dismisses the allied forces, releases them from obligation, sends them south to prepare defensive positions at the Isthmus of Corinth. But the 300 Spartans stay. Orders, prophecy, duty. The 3 pillars of Spartan existence, and all 3 demand they hold until death completes its work. 700 Thespians refuse to leave. Their commander, Demophilos, when ordered to withdraw, asks a question that echoes through history. Would retreating not be shameful? Leonidas has no answer to that, because the answer is yes. And these Thespian warriors, from a tiny city-state nobody remembers for anything except this moment, have decided that dying beside Spartans is preferable to surviving while Spartans die alone. 400 Thebans stay too, though sources disagree whether they're volunteers or hostages kept to ensure Thebes' loyalty before the battle ends. Probably some of both. Thebes is politically unreliable, suspected of Persian sympathies, and holding their warriors ensures the city doesn't defect before the battle ends. So roughly 1,100 Greeks prepare for the final stand. Not defending the wall anymore, they advance into the widest part of the pass, into open ground where they can deploy the phalanx properly, where they can kill as many Persians as possible before the mathematics completes its inevitable equation. It's a statement. We're not cowering behind fortifications, waiting for death. We're coming for you. We're going to make you pay for every foot of ground until you've paid so much that Persia remembers this pass forever. The Persians attack with everything. Not probing raids or limited assaults, but the entire weight of Xerxes' army crashing against 1,100 Greeks like a tsunami hitting a seawall. Infantry, cavalry, archers, the remaining immortals, ethnic contingents from across the empire, Medes, Egyptians, Indians, Scythians, wave after wave of warriors thrown into the killing corridor. The Spartan phalanx advances into this human flood. Spears break on Persian shields and armor. Swords are drawn. The xiphos, the short Spartan blade designed specifically for close-quarters killing when spears shatter. When swords break, they fight with shields, using the bronze-faced hoplon as a bludgeon to crush skulls and throats. When shields are hacked to pieces, they fight with broken spear shafts, with rocks, with bare hands. Leonidas is killing Persians at a rate that seems superhuman, not because he's stronger than other Spartans, but because 60 years of warfare have taught him efficiency, taught him where to strike for instant death, taught him to read an opponent's body language and counter before the attack develops. He's not the strongest or fastest Spartan here. He's the most experienced. And in phalanx combat, experience is measured in fractions of seconds that separate living and dying. A Persian noble, some cousin of Xerxes, wearing ridiculous amounts of gold, charges at Leonidas, screaming about glory and vengeance. The Spartan king doesn't even acknowledge the challenge, just pivots and drives his sword through the exposed armpit where the armor plates don't quite meet. The noble drops without ceremony, his glory lasting exactly as long as it took him to die stupidly. Leonidas is already moving to the next target, the next threat, the next Persian who needs to die before the mathematics say he's the one who dies instead.
But the mathematics are inevitable. Spartans are falling now, not from lack of skill, but from exhaustion and accumulated wounds, and the simple reality that 1,100 cannot indefinitely hold against 200,000. The phalanx is shrinking, gaps appearing where warriors fall, and there's no one to fill their position. Leonidas takes an arrow through the thigh. Doesn't fall. Doesn't even slow down significantly. Just breaks off the shaft and keeps fighting because acknowledging pain is a luxury warriors don't have in close combat. Another arrow hits his shoulder, punching through the gap between breastplate and pauldron. Still fighting. A spear thrust catches him across the ribs, breaking through bronze and opening flesh, but missing anything immediately vital. Still fighting. Then a Persian arrow, fired from distance by an archer who probably doesn't know he's targeting a king, takes Leonidas in the throat. The wound is instantly fatal. Blood floods his lungs. He drops to his knees, choking, drowning on internal hemorrhage. And the Spartans around him realize their king is dying. What happens next defines Sparta more than any philosophy or training program. They pull Leonidas's body back into the center of the formation and form a defensive circle around their dead king. Not retreating, not withdrawing to safer ground, just creating a shrinking perimeter where the king's corpse becomes the center point around which the entire battle rotates. Because letting Persians take a Spartan king's body for mutilation is unthinkable. Because duty extends beyond death. Because Sparta values honor over survival, and a king's dignity over a soldier's life. The fight for Leonidas's body becomes the battle's climax. 4 separate times, the Persians mass assault the defensive circle, trying to capture the corpse. 4 times, the Spartans drive them back through sheer ferocity, this contracting ring of warriors defending their fallen king with violence that terrifies even hardened Persian veterans. They're dying now, not just wounded, but killed. The phalanx breaking down from cohesive unit to individual warriors making isolated last stands. The Persian mountain force arrives in the rear. The immortals, who climbed the goat path, finally descending to attack from behind. The Greeks are surrounded completely now. Persians in front and behind. Escape impossible, even if Spartans believed in escape. The survivors retreat to a small hillock, maybe 30 feet high, the only elevated ground available. They drag Leonidas's body with them because abandoning their king is still unthinkable, even though they're all dying in the next few minutes regardless. On the hillock, they form the final defensive circle. Maybe 200 warriors left, most wounded, all exhausted beyond anything training can prepare you for. Shields lock one last time. The few remaining spears point outward, and they wait for the end. The Persians don't charge. They've learned that lesson very painfully over 3 days. Closing with Spartans gets you killed, even when they're wounded and exhausted and surrounded. Instead, they stand back at safe distance and order the archers forward. Thousands of archers. Orders to fire until nothing moves on that hillock. A Spartan warrior named Dionysus, earlier in the battle, when told that Persian arrows would be so numerous they'd block out the sun, allegedly laughed and said, "Good, then we'll fight in the shade." Whether he actually said it, or whether it's myth created afterward, doesn't matter. What matters is that it captures perfectly the Spartan psychology facing death, finding humor in apocalypse, treating imminent annihilation as an opportunity for a good one-liner, refusing to give your enemies the satisfaction of seeing fear. The arrows fall like black rain. Thousands of arrows fired in volleys so dense, the sky actually darkens. The Greeks raise shields and endure, but shields are already damaged from 3 days of combat, already porcupines of broken shafts. The men behind those shields are already wounded, already weakened by dehydration and blood loss. The first volley kills dozens. The second volley kills dozens more. The third, fourth, fifth. Eventually, there's no one left standing to hold shields. just bodies on a hillock that's become a monument built from corpses and broken bronze and arrows so numerous they look like grass growing from the dead. When the last Greek falls, the Persians approach with extreme caution, still half expecting some final Spartan trick. But there's no trick. Just silence. Just death. The 300 Spartans dead to the last man. The 700 Thespians likewise annihilated. Every single warrior choosing to stay and die rather than retreat and live. The Theban contingent mostly captured, surrendering when further resistance became meaningless, though Spartan propaganda will insist for centuries that they fought as bravely as everyone else. Xerxes tours the battlefield in a rage that borders on madness. His army has lost at minimum 20,000 dead over 3 days. Conservative estimate, some ancient sources claim numbers twice that high. 20,000 casualties fighting 300 Spartans in a pass that should have fallen in hours. The delay has allowed the Greek fleet to reposition at Salamis, the Greek army to fortify defensive positions south. News of Persian brutality and Greek resistance to spread throughout the entire Greek world. Most damaging to Persian morale, the immortals are shattered. Not just casualties, but psychological trauma. The unit that's supposed to be invincible, that's supposed to make enemies flee just by appearing, has been mauled by Greeks fighting in a narrow corridor. The surviving immortals have seen their brothers die by the thousand. They've learned that elite status means nothing against enemies who've trained their entire lives for exactly this kind of warfare. Xerxes, in a moment of spectacular pettiness that reveals how deeply Thermopylae has wounded him, orders Leonidas's body beheaded and crucified, nailing the headless corpse to a cross as public humiliation. It's a violation of Greek burial customs, an insult designed to desecrate the Spartan king even in death, proof that Xerxes won and Sparta lost. It backfires catastrophically. The Greeks, hearing how their enemy treated a king who died defending Greece, don't see humiliation. They see martyrdom, see a leader who fulfilled the oracle's prophecy, see proof that Sparta will sacrifice anything to resist Persian domination. Leonidas becomes larger in death than he was in life. The crucified corpse becomes a rallying symbol. Every Greek warrior fighting at Salamis and Plataea over the next year knows about Thermopylae, knows that if Spartans can stand 3 days against impossible odds, then surely the rest of Greece can fight half as well and still drive Persia back. The Persians continue south, burn Athens when they capture it, but the Athenians have already evacuated to their fleet. 1 month after Thermopylae, the Persian navy gets destroyed at the Battle of Salamis, lured into the narrow straits where Greek triremes operating in confined waters, like Spartans fighting in a narrow pass, slaughter the larger but less maneuverable Persian vessels. Xerxes loses control of the Aegean and most of his fleet in a single afternoon. The following summer, the Greek allied army meets the Persian land forces at Plataea.
The Spartans fight on the right wing, the position of honor, facing the Persian immortals in a rematch of Thermopylae, except this time on open ground where both sides can deploy fully. The Spartans advance into Persian arrows without shields raised, accepting casualties to close faster, and when they reach spear range, they shatter the immortals completely. The Persian commander dies, the Persian army breaks and flees, the invasion of Greece is over. Thermopylae didn't win the war. Militarily, it was a defeat, a delaying action that bought time and nothing more. But it accomplished something more valuable than battlefield victory. It proved that Persians could be fought, that their massive numbers weren't inevitable destiny, that free men defending their homes could stand against imperial armies conquering for glory. Every Greek warrior at Salamis and Plataea had Thermopylae in his mind, the knowledge that 300 Spartans held for 3 days. That if Spartans could die that well, then surely ordinary Greeks could fight half as bravely and still win. 40 years after the battle, the Greeks erect monuments at the hot gates. For the 300 Spartans, a stone lion and an epitaph by the poet Simonides that becomes immortal. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. Not that they fought bravely or died heroically, but that they obeyed Spartan law, fulfilled their duty, did what their society demanded, even when it demanded everything, including life itself. For the 700 Thespians who stayed when everyone else left, another monument. Here 700 from Thespiae lie, who died resisting subjugation. History forgets almost everything about Thespiae, its politics, its culture, its contribution to Greek civilization. But it remembers that 700 warriors from this tiny city chose honor over survival, chose to die beside Spartans rather than live knowing they abandoned them. The pass itself changes over millennia. Silt from the Spercheios River gradually extends the shoreline, widening the gap between mountain and sea. What was once a bottleneck barely 20 feet wide becomes hundreds of feet across. Modern highways cut through the region. The hot springs that gave Thermopylae its name mostly disappear. Tourists come by the thousands, standing approximately where Leonidas fell, trying to imagine what it must have felt like to face certain death and choose to advance anyway. But the geography still tells the story if you know how to read it. The mountain still rises nearly vertical on one side, the sea still crashes against rocks on the other, and in between there's the pass, wider now but still recognizable as a bottleneck, still obviously the kind of terrain where a small force could hold against a larger one if they were brave enough and disciplined enough and willing to die. An old Spartan warrior interviewed decades after Thermopylae was asked what made the 300 special. He thought for a long moment, then said something that reveals everything about Spartan culture. They weren't special. They were just Spartans. Any 300 Spartans would have done the same. That's what we are. He's both right and wrong. Thermopylae was extraordinary, but it was also exactly what Sparta had been systematically building toward for 3 centuries. A warrior society so focused on military excellence that its soldiers genuinely couldn't conceive of retreat, that valued collective honor over individual survival, that measured success not in living but in dying well when duty demanded death. The 300 weren't superheroes. They were products of the agoge, Sparta's brutal training system that took 7-year-old boys from their families and spent 13 years breaking and remaking them into weapons. They were citizens of a society that owned slaves, maintained power through systematic oppression, practiced eugenics by examining newborns and discarding the weak, and occasionally massacred helots to keep the slave population manageable through terror. But at Thermopylae, for 3 days, those brutal methods produced something undeniably magnificent. 300 men held the most powerful empire on earth to a standstill, in a narrow pass where numbers meant nothing and discipline meant everything. They died to the last man rather than surrender. They bought Greece the time it needed to organize the resistance that would ultimately drive Persia back and preserve Greek independence for another century. The sun sets over the hot gates the same way it did August 11, 480 BC, when the last Spartan fell and the Persians finally claimed ground they'd paid for with 20,000 corpses. The geography hasn't changed fundamentally. Still a passage between mountain and sea, still a place where a few could hold against many if they were willing to pay the price. But the story remains, etched into Western civilization's foundation. 300 Spartans versus the Persian Empire. Thermopylae, where numbers met discipline, and discipline won even in defeat, where free men fought slaves and freedom triumphed through sacrifice, where a Spartan king fulfilled prophecy and saved Greece by choosing death over dishonor. Molon Labe, come and take them. Xerxes came, he took the pass, he killed every defender, but he paid a price that echoed through his empire. 20,000 dead, his best troops traumatized, his navy soon destroyed at Salamis, his land army routed at Plataea. He won the battle and lost the war, conquered the ground and surrendered the strategic initiative, killed 300 Spartans and created a legend that would inspire resistance against tyranny for the next 25 centuries. That's what echoes from the hot gates across the millennia. Not that Sparta was morally superior, it wasn't. Not that the 300 were fighting for democracy, Sparta barely practiced it. But that when faced with impossible odds, when duty demanded sacrifice, when the only choice was between retreating alive and dying well, 300 men chose duty over survival, and died so well that history can't forget them. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. They lie there still in every way that matters, in memory, in legend, in the collective consciousness of civilization. 300 names carved into eternity, 300 warriors who proved that courage and discipline can sometimes, briefly, overcome any odds. 300 Spartans who stood in a narrow place and refused to break, even when breaking was the only logical choice. The past remains, weathered and changed, but fundamentally the same. A corridor between mountain and sea, where for 3 days in 480 BC, the future of Western civilization was decided not by empires or numbers, but by 300 men who chose honor over life and duty over survival. And they paid it. Every one of them. Down to the last man. That's immortality. That's legend. That's Thermopylae. Forever.